At the moment, so-called third country deals are being increasingly discussed in order to curb migration. A third country deal in which European countries shift responsibility for protection determinations to other states by carrying out asylum checks outside Europe, or even handing over the asylum check entirely to another country, also produces well-known and criticized examples. A recent case is the agreement between the United Kingdom and Rwanda. In April 22, the British government announced that it would send asylum seekers arriving irregularly in England or in the UK to Rwanda, more than 4,000 kilometers away, and that it would pay the Central African country £120 million in return for this. The opposition called the plan unethical and impractical, and UNHCR warned of impending human rights violations. This criticism echoes that of previous policies of this kind that have since been discontinued, such as Australia's Pacific solution, which sent people arriving by boat to the island states of Nauru and Manus and Papua New Guinea for protection assessments starting in the early 2000s. But also Israel's initiative, which from 2013 gave asylum seekers the choice of whether they would rather be detained in a camp in the Negev desert or sent to Rwanda to apply for asylum there, which they were then not allowed to do there. All of these third country deals are tailored to the participating states and differ in their details, but they have four key similarities. Firstly, they pose great risks for the rights of migrants. Some are stuck in a third country that may be declared safe, but in fact it may not be so, or only to a limited extent. Others are kind of imprisoned, where they are confined until they are involuntarily transported, or even until their protection check is completed and beyond. The centers on the Pacific Islands made headlines for years, among other things because of their inadequate health care, but also because children and their families were sometimes locked up for years, and there was often no end in sight to their detention. The accusation of legal vacuum is justified in such cases. Second, third country deals are often informal, not fully public, and vague. They are usually unofficial agreements or declarations, but not legally binding contracts or agreements. And this is where the casual term deal comes from, which emphasizes this informal character. The official name of the EU-Turkey Declaration, for example, rolls off the tongue more cumbersomely. In addition, the agreements are often worded so vaguely that even if their details are public, the information content is quite low. The informal nature of the agreements makes it more difficult to monitor their implementation. For example, the EU Parliament has no control over the EU-Turkey deal, as it is not an EU instrument, but merely a loose declaration between individual EU member states with Turkey, which can be broken at any time without legal consequences. The third fact that is common to all third country deals is they often have a low numerical but high deterrent effect. That's what the UK is planning with this, by the way. Particularly in the deals described, which provide for an asylum check outside Europe, the number of migrants actually affected is small. Australia sent about 3,100 people to Nauru and Papua New Guinea between 2013 and 2021. And the United Kingdom tried to put 100 people on the plane to Rwanda, but in the end the number shrank to 7 before the symbolic first flight was cancelled altogether after a court ruling. But the PR effect is even greater. The announcement of third country deals guarantees press attention. The longer the media keeps the deals in the headlines and the more critically they are assessed with regard to human rights, the more likely it is that the news will reach potential new migrants and that their governments, as governments hope, they will then change their intended destination country. But to what extent this is actually the case is not clear. And fourthly, all third country deals are expensive, immensely expensive. 70 million for France, 120 million for Rwanda, Well, the United Kingdom pays generously. Not to mention the plane that didn't take off, which cost British taxpayers another £500,000. And Australia's bill is even higher. The centre on Nauru alone cost a whopping 1.7 billion Australian dollars between 2017 and 2021. The EU-Turkey deal started with 3 billion euros, followed by another 3 billion. And all that money buys the practical implementation of the deals, but above all the political will of the third country. But this can wear off over time. Despite these many disadvantages, third country deals are becoming more and more common. Since the beginning of the 21st century, states have increasingly resorted to such deals in their migration policy toolbox, and they try to convince other countries to do so as well. As the examples I mentioned show, this is not a European phenomenon, but one of Western target countries. The USA, for example, has also agreements with Mexico and Guatemala to stop migrants at Mexico's southern border and send them back immediately. While these policies increased under Trump, Obama introduced them. But where does this wild growth of third country deals come from in the first place? And there are three reasons that work together. And the most important reason is the deals work as long as they are legal. Although they often do not have a long-term effect, they do have a quick effect that is immediately visible. After the EU-Turkey deal was concluded, the number of people arriving on the Greek islands fell and remained unusually low for a long time. Third country deals are therefore useful for governments because they suggest the ability to act. They do come with human rights and financial costs, and they only work as long as the respective third countries see a benefit for themselves and still do implement them. But a short and expensive effect is better than no effect. Well, that's at least government logic. And the second reason for the increase in deals is they are just another variation of the global trend of the past 20 years towards increasingly harsh migration management tools. The best known other example is walls and fences. Half of all border fortifications built since the Second World War have been built since the year 2000. And with it, isolation is booming. And third, over the past 20 years, mechanisms and platforms have emerged that promote global migration cooperation, especially between countries that are not direct neighbors or part of the same region of the world. The Global Forum on Migration and Development, which has been meeting since 2007, has laid the foundations. Agreements such as the UN Migration Pact and the UN Refugee Pact have anchored the principle of migration cooperation even more firmly. And the result was migration cooperation is on vogue today more than ever. It is demanded by all political directions. But the same mechanisms that are intended to promote the rights of migrants also make it easier to exchange ideas and make friends with new partners for whom these rights are, let's say, not so important. So how should we, us in Germany, you in the UK and others in Europe, deal with the complicated third country deals? There are two suggestions. We should use positive examples and at the same time recognize the limits of migration cooperation. Not all third country deals are dirty or bad because it depends on the structure and if they break international law. There are positive examples that protect people and that we should use. In recent years, we have seen the shelter model several times, in which people who are acutely threatened are quickly brought to safety in a third country where the protection check then takes place. For example, the UNHCR brought around 140 people from Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala to Costa Rica between 2016 and 2018 under the protection transfer arrangement before resettling them in the USA, Canada, Australia, and Uruguay. In 2021, the USA also housed thousands of Afghans in Albania, Kosovo, and North Macedonia, where protection checks were carried out before they went on to the United States. The historical origin of this approach is the so-called orderly departure program, which more than 500,000 Vietnamese used after 1979 to enter the USA safely and legally. And even if each of these programs has weaknesses and deserves criticism, they are still positive examples. And the shelter model is also a third country deal, but with one important point. The will to actually bring people to safety and at least partially take them in must be there in all countries involved. The model only protects those affected if the admission of those in need of protection actually happens, and not if the goal is to keep as many people as possible away. So keeping them in Rwanda is not the point. And if third countries can and want to actually provide protection. For example, if my home country Germany enters into partnerships with countries whose governments want to make quick money and where the interests of their own people are not valued, yeah, of course, then it's unlikely that migrants will receive real protection there. And this is the same with the UK and Rwanda. The German federal government's coalition agreement of 2021 states that applications from outside Europe should be examined. This review should include the shelter model and programs described herein. It is also sad but true, good migration cooperation can create safe paths for some people, but not for everyone. And even if a large proportion of people can receive protection status under the shelter model, there will still always be people whose test results are negative and who are forcibly deported to their countries or are stuck in the place of shelter for the long term. So even if we have an excellent cooperation with a third country, with legal paths for both high and low skilled people, a cooperation that includes not only migration but also the economy and development and education and health, irregular migration and human suffering will continue to occur under strong pressure. However, it would be a mistake to reject migration cooperation just because it does not solve the overall problem. Third country deals are like migration itself. They are neither good nor bad, but they can have a good and bad effect, depending on how cleverly governments design them and how legally they design them. Fundamentally, rejecting third country deals does not help, nor does trying to use them as a panacea regardless of the partner countries. Instead, we should examine on a case-by-case basis whether they correspond to our values and laws and have the desired effects. If this is not the case, the most important question will remain: do we have a better alternative? Because without a viable alternative, even bad third country deals remain in force. And there we are at the current discussion in the EU, but also at the UK-Rwanda deal. Honestly, if the UK-Rwanda deal would be put together legally, that means processing the asylum claims in Rwanda under British protection, because Rwanda is not such a safe country as they want to put. But let's just say it would be. The end game must be the people that really need protection must be allowed to enter the UK, because that was where they wanted to go. And if they deserve protection, they also deserve the protection from the UK. And it's the same with Europe. If we do this in any other country, if those people without any dangerous crossings and everything already can apply, and we find out that they deserve our protection, I will not go into the whole international law here. They deserve then to come to Europe as long as they need this protection. And as long, of course, we still can do it, but the EU must be at one page here altogether. I know there are some governments, one will be gone very soon, fortunately. And so this topic will not be the last time on this channel right now. And if you want to know something else, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.